the applications for ARMs are up, are more than doubled in the last year. So I guess increase in interest rates fueling a demand for ARMs again. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, last time we really heard about ARMs, we know what happened there. Things went south pretty quickly. There's some protection measures in place now. You know, they're going to really protect the borrower that they didn't previously have. What are your thoughts? Are you hearing a lot about ARMs? I mean, the fact that they've doubled year over year, I think is pretty huge.
Yeah, no kidding. Talk about that. What do you think the protections are? Are you talking about the margin or the cap?
I think both. So I think that the cap's going to be important. Obviously, you know, they're going to say it's never going to go higher than this. They're also putting, you know, in place that there can maybe be only one rate increase per year. You know, it's going to have that really 5-year window where it's fixed, and then after that, it's going to start adjusting, of course. But I'm hearing a 1 per year cap, and then obviously just an overhead cap on it as well, maybe 2 points, something to that extent. So I think it's interesting. I mean, right now with prime rates being as high as they are, you know, they're over 5%. You can get an ARM right now for that first 5-year term for just over 4%. So you can save that 1%. Obviously, it's going to have a couple factors that you're going to want to consider if you're looking at an ARM. It's going to be really how long you plan on being in the house. I mean, if you're going to be kind of in and out of that house in a 5-year or less, you know, getting that low rate now and knowing that you're going to be out of that house before the rate adjusts, I think it's a smart play. I assume you would agree.
What happens if property values come down?
Well,
what if you can't get out? What if you put 80% in, or what if you put 20% down, take out an 80% first mortgage under an adjustable rate mortgage, and property values fall by 30%?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be some risk if you're involved in an ARM there. There's not going to be an absolute fail-safe protection measure in place that I'm aware of. The goal would obviously be, if you are planning on staying in it longer than the 5 years, doing that refinance. You know, rates are going to continue to go up. We don't know what they're going to look like in 5 years, though. That's an interesting question. I mean, how do you defend against that?
I think you're probably overspending if you can't get into a 30-year fixed.
Yeah.
That would be my personal opinion. I'm a conservative person when it comes to how I go about borrowing. I like risk aversion also, even though many people have accused me of being fairly aggressive in some of my techniques and philosophies. I generally disagree with that. I, in general, believe that my techniques are a far more conservative approach than even what the most traditional concepts we've been taught would suggest we should be doing. So in my opinion, I have to suggest that people get into 30-year fixed loans and buy a property that they can afford at that interest rate.
Well, so here's a kind of a one-off. What if they're in a situation where they know that their income is going to go up dramatically within the next, you know, say within that 5-year window? Let's say they're in law school, for example. Let's say they're in medical school, and they know that within that, before that rate adjusts, ultimately they're going to have a massive increase in income. Would you say that would maybe call for looking at a little bit different?
There's always going to be there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. So I certainly can't disagree that there would be some instances where I might look at somebody's situation and say, okay, maybe this is one of those times where we don't necessarily have to follow the rule of thumb. I think that's a good example of that. There are certain people that with a fairly high level of certainty can expect that they will continue to realize, you know, increases to earnings. Most people cannot. Most people cannot.
Yeah.
You can't. There's so much that, you know, so much luck that goes involved. I mean, and I'm in a similar position. I can say with almost total certainty, because I've bet on myself for, you know, 2.5 decades when it comes to entrepreneurship, that I'll continue to keep earning more.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not,
because you're a case study over the span of, you know, over 2 decades.
Yeah, I have a lot of proof. I have a lot of evidence to lean into on that. However, right. You know, I still don't practice that when it comes to my borrowing. And yet, it's not that I'll never take risks with borrowing. I mean, one could argue that a $50,000 leverage used to start a hydrojetting business was, you know, a gamble in some ways. And I tried to mitigate as much of that risk as I could. On the front end, I thought about each and every worst case scenario, and it just so happened to be a $10,000 gamble I was willing to accept. Look, you're going to have to take chances.
there's no guarantees in business. If there were, everyone would be doing it. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or in investing. So you have to determine what, the reward is for the risk involved with that decision. And I'm not a huge believer that, it always moves in relation. I don't think that just because your reward is high, your risk also has to be. I think a $10,000 risk with all of the variables that I was contemplating on a hydrojetting business, the risk was actually really pretty low related, in relation to the upside potential. I knew that when we were going into this, one of my prerequisites, and there's really two, but one of them is a 7-figure upside potential. It has to have at least a 7-figure potential before I'm going to entertain it. Now, I knew we couldn't do that with one location, but I knew if we were successful in one location, we could easily scale it out, especially with the specific formula that we have by focusing in small towns versus going in and competing against the roto-rooters in the big cities. Sure. And I liked that concept, but when I looked at it and said, hey, this upside potential is at least 7 figures, if not more, there's franchise opportunities in this, there's social media opportunities in this. There's a lot of ways we can scale this thing out. And it's going to run me 10 grand if I had to just liquidate everything tomorrow and get rid of the equipment and take the 10,000 from the till. I'm out $10,000 just covering expenses on the front end of the business getting up and running. That's a gamble I'm willing to take. That's very low risk, in my opinion, with a very high potential reward. So I'm looking for lower risk with much higher reward potential opportunities while I'm out there. But for anybody to come in and suggest that they're going to be in a risk-free environment and still build something to an extraordinary life level is pretty low odds. I mean, you're just not going to find a ton of great examples of people that have done that. You're going to find some anomalies, and you're probably not going to be one of them. I don't like banking on becoming an anomaly. I like realizing that I'm, for the most part, a dummy. I'm, for the most part, somebody that loves downtime and non-professional time as much as I love professional time. So I'm not somebody that wants to grind it out 20 hours every single day. I want, to count on other people. And I know that I'm just an average dude. And yet, therefore, I'm going to focus on areas that are just very, very commonly producing results that are, not the exception to the rule, and still succeed and have an extraordinary life.
Yeah, and I love that, you're not even looking at deals unless you can make that, 7-figure income off of it. If you're going to be involved in, in a business and trying to scale it. Same thing with us in Lavish Keys. I mean, that's an easily achievable 7-figure income for each of us in a relatively short window of time on that. So it definitely checked the box. Same thing with the drain company there, guys. Especially if you're spending time and things, and I don't know how much time you're spending on the drain company. I know that Lavish is about 5 hours.
About 5 minutes a day.
5 minutes a day. Well, that's still something, but
there's about 40 hours. There's about 40 hours a week for the first 3 months. And I usually have a rule of thumb where I want to dedicate at least full-time hours, at least for a 90-day window, while systems and processes are being developed. And then we can recruit and train in order to delegate into those systems and processes. And then it becomes about great partnerships. It becomes about a great team, and it becomes about oversight, consistency with oversight, and being a good leader in those times in order to make sure that the growth continues to happen the way it should. But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very time-consuming process on the front end, but over time, because of my excellent partnership and the team that we have there, have been able to really, realize a fairly high level of passivity with that business for the last year.
Yeah, so a little bit more work up front. Obviously, you're in a fairly passive situation at this point. And this is just an additional stream of income for you. So, I mean, what we're always preaching here on the channel is to have multiple lines in the waters, guys. That's the best way to obviously accumulate wealth. And also, if any of them kind of fall off, if any 1 or 2 revenue streams disappear, you weren't 100% beholden to those or reliant on those to pay your bills every single month, for example. So guys, whether it's $100 a week or $1,000 a month that you can add, as additional revenue to you, find those additional revenue streams. I mean, I cannot state enough how important that is. I personally have, at any given time, 10 to 15 of those. Sometimes they come and go. Some have legs that have been around for years. Some of them I've been involved with for 20 plus years. So, and everything in between. So, any final parting shots to share on that, Matthew?
I guess the one thing I would say is, just because I say a prerequisite is at least a 7-figure potential, it doesn't mean that I have the 100% expectation that I'll build to a 7-figure plus potential. Most of my businesses have not achieved a 7-figure outcome, but they could if we continue to work the formula. But there are times where you get into something and you just don't necessarily feel as passionate about it as you otherwise would need to in order to have that 7, 8, 9-figure outcome. Mm-hmm. And I honestly believe most things could grow to that extent if you really focused on concentrating on the scalability of things. But again, I have to be able to see that it can at least reach 7 figures.
Sure.
And that there's not going to be that capacity at 100K, 250K, 500K. And by shooting bigger and changing how I set goals, because I used to set goals so small because I hated disappointing myself. And I think a lot of people do that. We just sort of, 5 million a year, come on, get real. Yeah, okay, fine. But if I'm 90% wrong, I'm still going to blow your $100,000 a year goal out of the water and hit $500,000 a year. And that was a lot through Brendan Bouchard, a really great influencer on YouTube. I would check him out. I just remember something that I had heard through him. I want to say that was him that I owe credit to on that. But he really started helping me think about those bigger, hairier, more audacious goals versus being such a pussy about it. And I just want to make sure that people don't wimp out. Just really look for bigger things before you invest too much time and, God forbid, any money whatsoever on something that's going to be so mediocre that you're really not doing yourself any favors by trying to transition from one mediocre option and perhaps a W-2 career you're not that all that satisfied with into some mediocre self-employment where you work for yourself for the same or less, and you end up with all that stress and a lot more hours that you're responsible for. Because I guarantee you, most businesses do not. You cannot get off the ground for 40 hours a week. It takes a lot more work than that, and it certainly generally takes a lot more than 90 days.
Yeah, I mean, if being an entrepreneur were easy, everyone would do it. It does require hard work. It does require long hours. I mean, I vividly remember getting businesses started and I was working 60, 70, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. I mean, consistently, but there was that light at the end of the tunnel. I knew that I wanted to be a successful business owner, and I knew that it was going to take a lot of that hard work up front so that, down the road, I was going to be able to reap the rewards of that hard work by having some more passive income streams like you talked about there. So, brother, I'm just noticing the time here right now. I've got a hard stop, so I've got to run. Look forward to catching up on the next video. I know I want to dive into the economy, what's going on there, what's going on with inflation, what's going on with interest rates. And I definitely want to chat with you about what's going on in real estate right now. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. So I will see you on the next video.
Awesome. Enjoyed it. Talk soon.
Thanks. All right. Talk soon, Matt. Later, bro.